Big fat Santa looking guy pretends he's a rock star. You want to sound like me? Stick around and I'll show you how to do it and do it cheaply. Not expecting that out of an acoustic guitar, are you? How you doing? It is Ubi, and today I'm going to give you a little bit of an info about how I build the tone for this guitar, building it from the ground up in a budget-friendly way. Now, let's be real. Guitar can be gear can be expensive, and I believe anyone can create a killer tone, or at least try to get close to a killer tone, without breaking the bank, and that's exactly what I've done here. I'm going to walk you through my signal chain, explain why I do the things the way I do, and show you how I overcome some of the limitations of the guitar. Spoiler alert, this entire setup uses about a $200, maybe less if you can find a good sale on it, acoustic-electric guitar, a very cheap DI cable, and all free software. If I can make this work, you can too. The reality is most of us don't have access to high-end guitars, studio-grade equipment, fancy amps. But that doesn't mean that we can't get really good, sometimes great results. The process I'm working with is, well, it's what I have. And the big thing is what you need to do is learn your gear inside and out and be really creative in how you're shaping your tone. Now, the idea here is to use guitar smart routing, tone shaping, and turning an affordable, sometimes flawed equipment into something that sounds polished and professional. It takes a little bit of effort, but trust me, it is worth it. Let's start with the basics. My guitar is a Kona K2 series thin body acoustic electric. It's pretty cool hybrid acoustic electric guitar. It's got a spruce top, rosewood fretboard, lightweight, very thin, super comfortable to play on. The built-in piezo pickup, though, down here in the saddle, which you can't see just off the screen, it's plugged directly into my system. But a piezo can be very tricky as it tends to be kind of a brittle sound and can be very harsh, especially with heavy pick attack. And I'm going to explain how to address this as we move along. Now, next thing I use is a Rocksmith cable from a DI. Yeah, the game Rocksmith. It did have a direct interface cable that would go from your guitar into your computer. I have one of those. You could probably pick up one for cheap, unused, or maybe you have a better direct interface. If that's your case, go with it. This will work with any DI at all that you have. You just need to get your guitar into your system. And that's going to be up to you. That's a little bit outside of the scope of this video, but as long as you have a guitar that's playing into your computer, you can pick it up from here and shape your tone. Finally, the software. My entire tone chain lives inside of Cantabile Lite, a free and incredibly powerful VST host. This program acts as the hub where I build and manage my entire signal flow. You don't need a high-end DAW to create amazing tones. This little program can do a lot, and the fact that it's free makes it even better. Now, with these basics out of the way, let's dive into our signal chain and break down how everything flows from start to finish. And this is where the real magic happens. So as you see here, this is the main screen. The tone that I shape here runs from my DI. My DI's input goes through here, and I have this set up with a driver that runs my signal for my guitar into this port here. First thing, we go into what I call my Guitar Tamer. This is a rack with a bunch of additional effects that you can see here. We will go over those in a moment. From the Guitar Tamer, we go into a compressor just to take the output signal here, make sure it's compressed and smooth. Then we go into another rack where I have my actual setup in here, including some plugins. I have amplitude for my with my amp sim running inside of there, nadir or in that nade IR for my cab. And then I have another little special thing, which I call my Shimmer Box, which is your rack down here that has the tones, or what actually makes my tone, which is a bunch of effects inside of here. We will take a look at all of those here in a bit. And then once we're done with going through the guitar rack and everything gets mixed properly, we go into a final EQ where I give it a last bit of mastering and a bit of shaping, and finally out to whatever we're doing. In this particular case, this is going out just into my speakers. It could also go out into a DAW for recording if your setup will allow that. Can get tricky once you have two different things trying to use ASIO drivers at the same time, but there are ways that you can make it work out there. Or out for, like the way I do it, out for live streaming so that I can perform and play the guitar for you just by playing it straight through the setup. So let's go down and get into the nitty gritty of exactly what we have set up here. First, I'm going to unlink my input from the chain, and we're going to run it straight into the speaker so you can hear what the guitar sounds dry. So this is the actual guitar as is. You can actually hear there's a little bit of static in there. It's not the worst sound, but you'll notice it's kind of brittle noise, and it can be kind of harsh and doesn't have a lot of low end to it. So we've got a lot of shaping we need to do up and down the frequency spectrum on that. So the first thing that we do is we bring it into what I call the Guitar Tamer. Now the Guitar Tamer is a bunch of different effects here that we're going to take a closer look in a moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send just the Guitar Tamer out, and you'll hear the difference between the tone from directly from the guitar and from the Guitar Tamer. First things first, I have the guitar turned up, almost no noise to the signal. So one of the first things that the Guitar Tamer does is it helps us get rid of the RF interference that we've got on the DI cable. And you can see it's giving a little bit more of our heavy lower tones back. Now it does unfortunately introduce a little bit. You hear in there that little bit of as it fades out there, a little noise. That is unfortunately an absolute limitation because that noise is actually just the signal in the guitar that it's just embedded in the guitar, and I've done everything I can to get that out of there. And it's one of those things that maybe you can continue to tweak a little bit here and there and get that signal out just a little bit by little bit. But for me, that tone already has a little bit more beef to it. Now, it's not very loud, and that's because I actually have it running through some more gain. Especially, we're going to go through some high gain here in a bit, so I don't want to blow everything out. But that is what that sounds like as is. Now, the next thing that we'll do is we will take a closer look at the Guitar Tamer itself. So the first thing that you'll notice here is this is the in from outside of there. So when we went into this stereo in, that comes into this this port right here. So the first thing we did is we've actually run it into three separate chains. I have a low, medium, and high chain going here. And we have, first thing is TDR Nova, which is a free plugin that you can find out there on the internet. It is a very good, not just an EQ, but a dynamic EQ, which allows us to do some additional dynamic things with it. Each one of these goes through a dynamic EQ, and each one of them, what they do is separating the tone out. I want to only work specifically with each tone. So here we're doing a low pass filter so that we're getting just the lows up to about 200 hertz or so. On the mids, we scoop out the middle here. So we're going from 200 to 2.5 kilohertz. And then we do a high pass, which we're actually overlapping a little bit. And this is something I've played with. You can run this high pass at 2.5 kilohertz, and it will work just fine. I found though that if I take a little bit of the mids and mix it up here with the high, one of the things I do is I have the high brought down a bit because it already is a very bright sound. And I want to mix in a little bit more of the mids that come with it so that when that mixes back into my mix, it mellows it out a little further. So that's why I've got that running at 1,000. But you can easily run it and do a true segregation from the low, mids, and high. Now, this is the first part where you actually do a little bit of tone shaping, as you can see there. So next thing, all three of them go through noise suppression. The noise suppression is what's actually giving us a quiet signal. If I bypass our noise suppression, you can hear right there, especially when I bypass that high. you can hear the crackle in there. So each one of these is designed to pull out the noise that we have. And this is a noise suppression from Vadim Taranov, which I hope I pronounced that correctly. You can find this on the internet as well. And you'll see all three of these have slightly different settings because they're all dialed in so that I'm only suppressing just to the point where I get that crackle out of the system. We get that fuzz out of the system. Because as you are suppressing noise, you also potentially are going to be suppressing some of your actual good signals you want to keep. So you want to keep that at a minimum. So with those done, I then run each one of these into a compressor. Now I found the compressor on the mid is not needed. It actually causes the sound to be a little too harsh, so I have it bypassed. But each one of these goes through a different compressor setting, which is useful for that particular one. For example, the high-end setting, I'm getting rid of those really, really highs because of the brittle nature of it. Whereas on the lows, I'm not as aggressive on the compression because I want to keep it, except for, basically I want to stop it right where it starts booming. We don't need the boom out of that. So that's how both of these are set up. Now your setups may be different. Obviously, you'll need to dial them into exactly what you need them in. But I have a significantly faster attack and release on the high end as opposed to the low. As you see in the low, we're attacking at 50 milliseconds, whereas on the high, it's only 5 milliseconds. The low end, we release a little smoother as well at 200. High end, we're releasing at 50. And the threshold for the high end is lower as well because, again, I want to actually pull out some of those really harsh high ends, whereas I want to keep the low end out there and let it soften and let it be out there. Otherwise, I can't get the real good crunch whenever we're overdrive distorted. Finally, we go through another pass. This is an actual true EQ pass, and what I'm doing on these is we're actually shaping the sound. So I'm rolling off, for example, in the low end, I'm rolling off the subharmonics so that we don't get those, so that those sort of things. We're also tamping it down at the upper end so that we don't boom as well, and we're bringing up the middle of the low end so to really get that weight and that thickness of the low end in there. And this is where we're actually using the threshold for, because I want to make sure that the real muddy part of the low end doesn't come through. And I only want to really put that in there when we're really pick attacking. So I have a threshold on the third, which is third band down here, which is running at about 185 hertz or so. I only want it to, when we're playing with a harder attack, so it's at about a negative 38-ish. This could actually be dialed up a little bit and still be fine. But somewhere in there, this one was done when I sat there and played it and got it set for where I want for the taste. And you can see that yellow line pulling down real hard there, and that's where it's pulling down to get the boominess and the muddiness out of it. So that's the low end on the mids. I haven't rolled off the top of the mids because a lot of my high is actually coming out of the middle of the chain. But we do have that one also done with the threshold so that we will not have too hard of an attack. But as you see, we've rolled the entire low end off of this, and like I said, we've kept the upper end, and I've actually pushed it just a bit. Because again, I actually want a lot of my highs to come from this more mellow mid-range, as opposed to the high. And then you'll see here, we actually have rolled off the really, really high end. So we get that bright, brittle transients, pull those out, and we've got some serious thresholding done here on, this one doesn't even need to be on. So this area is thresholded as well, so that we don't pull it off when we're playing lightly. But we do getting it harder pick attack, just so that we don't introduce a lot of harshness into that segment. Once those are all done, I have it going into one final noise reducer, which is, in this case, it's the TL noise reducer, which is also available for free out there. I have it in the auto mode. Basically, it's catching a little bit of a stray. You can see in here, we do have some, especially on the low end, we've got a lot of crackle coming in here. and that still kind of slips by. There's just a tiny little bit. It's kind of sub-audible because you can't hear it. But once the compressor and the amplifier take a hold of that, you'll definitely hear it in the chain. So I want to get rid of it as much as possible outside of this chain. So, and then that all goes out. This is what I call my guitar tamer. What this did was take that crackly, kind of weak guitar signal that we had before. It was very brittle, lots of brightness in it, no low end to it, and we have injected the as much of the low end we could regather from it back up into it, kind of tame back those highs to make it a little less bright, and because of that, that just gives the tone a little more thick, a little more full, and it means once we get down the chain into the actual amplification, we have a signal that's a little more electric guitar like, so that we have a better use of the signal as it goes through. Now, so the next thing that we do is we go into a compressor here, and this is just a general kind of a mastering style compressor. Specifically, I'm using M compressor. It is another free one that's out there. As a matter of fact, there is a huge suite of free plugins from the company that makes this. And there's a lot of really good ones out there. I'm using their equalizer at the end of the chain here, and there's other places I use it, especially when I'm doing recording. So there's lots of really good ones. Again, they have a lot of good paid ones, but they also have a lot of free ones. But this one, I'm actually using one of their presets, which is the Master -6, because I don't want, again, I need to make sure that we don't push too hard into the amp, because then we're going to potentially clip as we get to the amp, and then we're just going to sound terrible in the amp itself. So this is their mastering phase, but also gives it about a 6 decibel decrease, and then that goes into what I call my guitar rack. So the guitar rack itself has a lot of things in it. First things first, it drops into the saturator plugin from the same group of plugins I told you about earlier. This is just to give it a little bit more of a thick tone. It's not really needed, to be honest, because you'll hear whenever I play my tone here, got a pretty thick tone to it as well. We could bypass that saturator. Still feels about the same. It gives a little bit, it's throwing in a little bit of harmonics and a little bit of resonance to it, so that there is some things that it does add to the tone, so I actually use it in there, but it's very light, it's very subtle. I don't need a lot of saturation added to it, because the tone itself at this point does have a decent amount of saturation. From there, we go into Amplitude, which is my go-to. Now, this is the tone I'm working with right now is a tone that you can find on ToneNet called Free Metalcore Tone. It is a very middle-focused tone. It is one that runs completely with Amplitude 5 CS, which is Amplitude 5 Custom Shop. It's the free version. And it works really well with this. I actually have it basically dialed in here. Now, the things that I've done is I've bypassed the cab that it has, because I'm going to use my own. And also it came with a compressor, which I've turned off. And this graphic EQ here does a lot of the shaping on this tone. Since it's pushing the mids, it really does a good job of adding thickness. There's a lot of thickness that comes through that. That is set stock from what it came with this particular tone. Again, I removed the compressor because I've done a lot of compression into this as well. This is a tone that's kind of expecting you to go straight into it, which we've done a lot of tone shaping. It uses the SLD 100, which is the Soldano clone, basically. We are running through a normal chain. I don't need extra brightness because of the type of guitar. We are running the crunch chain, and we are running through the overdrive chain. So OD, I've got it set about 2 o'clock or so for the preamp, and then in the master, I've got it set about somewhere in the around noon on that. Presence is up at about 9. We're pushing the treble a little bit. I've got the mid rolled back a little bit because we've got so much of it pulled up in the pedal over here. We don't need to push it in the amp. And then I have the bass pushed up a lot on this. I actually probably can dial this back a little bit now that we've got the tone shaped the way we want it. It's got some beef. It's got a little bit of a low end, especially. It's amazing since that's coming off of a Acoustic-electric, just how much low end it has in it. So those are the settings for this. Again, we are bypassing the cab, so the cab settings don't matter because we are running it into a plugin from a company called Ignite called Nade IR, which allows you to use IR files, which will be used to shape in the way a cab would sound like. They also have that in Amplitude 5, but in Amplitude 5, you don't have access to the to be able to load custom IRs if you're on the custom shop version. So Amplitude 5 CS does not allow you to load your own IR. If it did, I would not need this plugin. I would just go straight through Amplitude 5. So if you own Amplitude 5, you don't necessarily need this particular plugin. You could run a custom IR inside of Amplitude 5. Now, the one that I'm using is one that was actually given away by Glenn Frigger over at Spectre Sound. And if you get a chance, by the way, go over and check out his channel. His wife is going through some medical issues. He's unable to produce a lot of new content right now. So to help him out, go check out his content out there. Roll back, play some of his content, help a brother out as far as that's concerned. But he did release a really nice sounding IR that I use for my cab modeling, which gives us the sound. He gave his package, which was free, gave a mixed version through a Nev mixer, and then also he's got a version off of a dynamic mic and a condenser mic. I don't remember the exact ones. If you go find where he gave this away, it's in one. He gave this away in one of his most recent videos. He explains exactly what each one of those are. I know that the dynamic one has a more warm tone. The condenser mic has a bit more of a biting attack, which I don't need. So those are the two I'm using. But you can also, these down here came with this particular plugin, and some of these are really good. For example, using the 421 mic on center, and then using it on a off degree there. Sounds pretty good too, but I just happen to like the one that Glenn had available. I'm human. I miss as many notes as I make. So, and then what I do is I have it set about roughly 20% more onto the Nev side over here, just because I'm only using the dynamic one here to mix into it to give it a little more thickness. So those are my cabs. Now, from there, the tone splits out into two places. I can turn off this lower chain here, and this will turn off my Shimmer Box, my extra effects. So we'll have a much more dry tone. But this is my secret sauce. This is what I added the shimmer to it. Now, my particular genre is 80s glam rock, hair metal, a little bit of thrash. I'm not personally much of a shredder. I really don't have the chops for it, but mine. I love the spacey, big, thick 80s metal side. Now, I've tried to kind of merge it a bit with a tighter, more modern metal sound. And I really like the way that particular tone comes out. So the first thing we do, again, so we have one tone that is running into this, which is a mixer. And it is the tone that's straight from the amp. So that's exactly as it comes without the effects on it. So the first thing that we do on the effects is I don't need the low end for these effects. These are shimmer effects. These live up high on it. So we have just using a high pass filter where we're rolling off from the 100 hertz down. So basically about 135 is where we start. So that I don't need the subharmonics in there to muddle this up. I just need the high sparkly parts. So we go into another rack here for shimmer. Now I've got a chorus, a delay, a reverb, and a phaser. The phaser really is kind of my secret weapon. We'll get to that in a moment. But the chorus itself is here, and we currently had it. I currently had it off, so because I was recording recently and I didn't need the full shimmer effect. So you see, we put it on there. Check out the chorus. Now the chorus is actually very gentle. It's got only about a point. The rate is about 30%. Depth is way down. Not much of a delay there. I do have a little bit of stereo spread on it, and it's pretty deep into the mix for the chain. Now that's not where it's going to end up, but this is for the chain itself. And I'm using only 2 voices on it, but it's without the chorus, with the chorus. It just makes it a little bit fuller, just a touch of a tease to give it a little bit more shimmer on the outside there. Then we're running through a delay. I'm using M delay from that same free bundle. And this one I am using, the feedback is rolled back a little bit, as is the gain on it. The resonance on it is about 30 or so here. I'm running in with the sync enabled. We're using it on quarter note, dotted quarter notes specifically. It sounds fine with either the dotted quarter notes or just the standard quarter notes. That gives it a little bit more of that 80s delay tone to it. But again, subtlety is what I'm looking for on that one. And then I have the M Charm Verb from the same pack, which is another reverb there. It's only running about 25% wet because I don't want to saturate this entire chain too much with this particular one. Like I said, we're building off the chorus, then off the delay, then we're adding the reverb to it. And it's also very subtle. So when you come in here, it's like way up there on the length. I brought it way down, about 700 or so, between 700 and 800. But the size starts small, so I want it to be a nice and big, but I don't want it to stick around for too long. The rest of these are all stock from the default on it. So again, it just gives it a little bit of that, little bit of the reverb. To kind of really smooth it out a little bit, my playing is a little bit on the sloppy side, so I kind of need the delay and the reverb to cover for me a little bit. And finally, the phaser. Now I'm using M Phaser from, again, from that same group of free plugins that are out there. And this, I can't tell you how I set it up. This was one done 100% by ear, because I wanted to give it just a subtle little bit of texture. Was bypassed before, but gives it a little more texture to the sound. This one is it's one of those where this is part of the ubi tone. So this is a by ear. It's not really a scientific. This is kind of where the actual artistry of the tone shaping came from. So on that one, you can look at the settings that are there on the screen. They may be good for you, they may be not. It's all going to be to your taste. But this is part of what took the tone that I built and turned it into my tone. My tone is this is the fingerprint specifically for the ubi tone right there. So it comes out of the Shimmer Box and comes into this is back here on the guitar rack. So again, we have the full signal going into the N, and then the Shimmer Box going into the side chain here. And on this one, I've got mixing the mid and side. The mid is the N, side is the side chain. And so we've got about 64% on the ratio on the side here, and about 60 or so percent here. So I'm actually going to dial that down a little bit so that there's a little less of the shimmer. Not bad. It's got a tone that you could potentially do some soloing with too, as you heard there. And that little bit of shimmer gives it just a bit of a taste, a bit of a touch. I can't shred worth a damn on this one because when working on lowering the action to make it work, I brought the saddle down a little bit too much. So I've got some buzzing frets in this area of the fretboard up here. I need to get a shim put in on this so that I can bring that back up a little bit and get those buzz out of there. Again, work in progress. You work with what you got. That saddle desperately needs a replacement because it's got some grooves worn into it as well, but it's not in the budget right now, so you play with what you got. So those go into that mix, gets the mix down to where we want it, and we send it out of the rack. So from there, it goes into Final Pass Equalizer, which I currently got it under M Equalizer, again, from that same pack of plugins, so the free that I told you about. I'm using one of the presets for Guitar Dark to kind of give it a little bit more of a lower end to it, but they've got a couple of other good guitar presets. So that makes it a little bit brighter there. This E-guitar one is not bad. Kind of got kind of an old school vibe there. The guitar solo one really kind of feels, I don't know what they were trying with it. Doesn't really, to me, It seems to me that one actually kind of, to be honest, is a little bit too heavy on some of the gating. But there's a for more heavy sounds. You got heavy guitar 1, 2. These all just do a good job of kind of resetting everything, making sure everything that we've done to at this point kind of stays there, so we still get articulation, especially on the lows of that. That's kind of the biggest part there. But once that's done, it goes out into the main speakers and out into what you're hearing. So, is it great? I think it is. Is it the best that you could do? Probably not. There are still tweaks and stuff that I could use on this guitar chain to make it a little bit better. But when you think about the fact that for just the cost of this guitar and that cheap ass cable, all this other software, we're playing something that you could potentially rip out some 80s glam rock air metal for. I'm pretty well impressed with it. But there you have it. That's the breakdown of how I take this, which is my baby. It's the only guitar I own. Unfortunately, poverty sucks, but it's not an excuse not to create. If you've got music in you and you want to make some music, and there's a certain type of music you want to make, get out there and make it, man. Use what you got. There's no reason to not get out there and create, and more importantly, share it with the world. Does my guitar playing suck? Well, of course it does. I'm not a great guitarist. I've just started getting much more invested in my guitar playing, in what I do, but that doesn't change the fact that it's music and you're making music, and it's cool. It's awesome to make music. Whether you are the biggest, baddest shredder out there, or you can just play some cowboy chords, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what genre you like to play. Create. Share it out there. Let's all find something we like. I like what I play, and I like hearing a lot of what other people's play. And some of them are really talented musicians. Some of them are just like me. People are trying to learn and trying to become better. All that matters is this: you're only in competition with yourself. If you are a better guitar player today than you were yesterday, and you had fun doing what you're doing, then you're winning, man. That's all that matters about it. If this was content that was good for you, if it was something that you feel that is of help to you, of value to you, or entertained you in any way, subscribe. Become subscribed down there. Click the like, and more importantly, leave me a comment. Tell me about other plugins that I don't know about that are free. Other ways that I can run this signal chain and make it better. Or tell me how you took some of this and made it work even better. Record me a video so I can listen to it. I can give you a like, I can give you a comment, and I can subscribe to you. So once again, embrace the suck, produce with what you got, keep on rocking.